Um, it's great to be back with you, and I've really been looking forward to this. I enjoyed the last time that I was with you, and so at 7 p.m. Wednesday, April 12th, 2000. My oldest daughter, Sabrina, had just had surgery in a major hospital in Charlotte. Her husband, Rex, and her younger sister, Kim, they were in the room with her, and they were discussing who was going to stay with Sabrina that night and who would go home and keep the 4 kids, ages 8, 6, 4, and 2. Well, Kim, being a smart person, she figured real quickly, well, I'll stay with Sabrina. And so Rex kissed Sabrina goodnight, and he went home. And so Kim asked Sabrina, how are you doing, Sabrina? Sabrina said, I'm not doing too good. Says, I've got a lot of pain. So Kim went to the nurse and asked the nurse to give her some pain medicine. Well, about 9 o'clock, she continued to have a lot of pain. And all of a sudden, she began to jerk and went into a seizure, and it just freaked Kim out. I mean, she went running to the nurse, says, Nurse, something's terrible wrong with Sabrina. And so the nurse came, and by that time, Sabrina was sedative, and she said, well, it's maybe it's some gas or something, you know. She gave an excuse, and so then about 11 o'clock, finally Kim went to sleep, and so, Sabrina went to sleep, and so Kim began to get ready for bed, trying to get comfortable, and so again, Sabrina woke and says, I am in terrible pain. Something is wrong. And then again, she says, I think I'm going to throw up. And so at that time, Sabrina started jerking, and Kim put the bowl up to her mouth, and then all of a sudden she threw up, and Kim, she just dropped the bowl and went running to the nurse. Something's terrible wrong. Something's wrong. So the nurse came, and so they had to clean up, change Sabrina's clothing, and got her all fixed up again, and says, please call the doctor. Something's wrong. She said, well, it's probably the anesthesia, causing her to be nausea. So then got her fixed up, and then about 2 o'clock, the same thing happened. She went into this seizure, jerking, throwing up, and by this time, Kim is just going crazy, and she's just hollering at the nurse, just, call the doctor, something is wrong. So at 4 o'clock, the doctor finally came in, and as soon as he came in, Sabrina went into this jerking and seizure, and so he immediately told Kim to push the nurses, and he went to the hallway and screamed out code Alpha, which means medical emergency. So the emergency team came in, of course, and along with the nurse, and Kim just jumped all over this nurse, screaming at her, said, I told you something was wrong. I told you something was wrong. Why didn't you listen to me? And about that time, the chaplain came in and had to literally drag Kim off of this nurse and took her to another room, and she said, let me alone. She said, I got to call Rex. So this is what happened according to Rex. Rex got the message. Marcella was still at the house, and so she was able to keep the the children. Rex jumped in the car, went to the hospital, and they were preparing Sabrina for emergency surgery. And he got there just before she went into surgery, and he said he was shocked when he saw Sabrina. I mean, she looked like death. And he says, I loved you. Says, please hang in there. Fight this thing. And so Sabrina promised. Said, I will. And Rex says, you promise? She said, I promise. So here's what happened according to the doctors. What had happened is that in her surgery, they had failed to cauterize one of the veins, and she had been bleeding internally all day and all night. And the blood was filling up her cavities, and her organs were shutting down. And they had to give her 9 units of blood during this surgery. And they had to go in and suck the blood out and find and correct everything, and find this vein that was bleeding and cauterize it. And so now this is what happened according to Sabrina. And she shared this with the family about 2 weeks after this experience. And I'm going to talk to you in the first person as though I was Sabrina, because I want you to really experience what Sabrina experienced. She went into surgery, and said, I could feel the knife cutting my belly open. And afterwards, the doctors explained this as being intraoperative awareness. And it occurred because she had lost so much blood that the anesthesia did not work properly. And so, as she said, she felt the knife cutting her belly open. And the pain was just excruciating, unbearable. And all she could do was say, God, help me, please, God, help me. And she couldn't speak or couldn't move, but she could hear everything that the doctors were saying. She could feel the knife cutting up. She could feel them sucking the blood out of her cavities. She could even feel them moving her organs around to get all the blood into. And she said the pain was just unbearable, and I just kept praying, oh, God, help me. Oh, God, help me. Oh, God, help me. And then she began to spin. She said her body just began to spin upward into a white cloud. And there was this bright light. And as she approached the bright light, there was Granny. And as though she was there waiting for Sabrina. And she said, Granny grabbed her hand and began to rub her hand and says, everything's going to be all right, Sabrina. Everything's going to be all right. And she said the pain went away. And she experienced such great peace there as Granny comforted her. And Granny is her mother's mom. And Granny is one of the most saintly women I've ever known. And she loved people. She taught adult Sunday school classes all of her adult life. And So as she was there rubbing my hands and said, everything's going to be all right. And I looked, and her hands, there were no wrinkles. And her hands were smooth. And I looked into her face, and there were no wrinkles. And she wasn't old, and she wasn't young, but she was radiant and ageless. And Sabrina said, I experienced a comfort and a joy that is just unimaginable. And I told Granny, I said, Granny, I want to stay here with you. There's such peace. And Granny says, Sabrina, it's not your time. You have 4 children. And you have Rex, your husband, and they need you. And so the next thing that I remember is I woke up and I was on a ventilator, and I stayed in ICU for 3 days. I was in the hospital for over a week, and then at home resting for 2 weeks as I started to recover. Now, the reason that I share this story with you, as a father, this was one of the most horrible experiences of my life. As I watched my daughter there in ICU, and it was a difficult situation. In fact, in today's lesson, as you reviewed last week, question 25, it will ask you to share a difficult time that God carried you through. And so this is my story. It was a horrible experience. In fact, the shocking image of seeing my daughter there looking like death, there in the ICU unit, is a picture that has been stamped forever in my mind. And just recently, 2 weeks ago, or maybe 3 weeks ago, I was sharing this story with Sabrina. We were talking about it, and we've talked about it many times before. But she says, Daddy, says the most significant part of this experience is this: I have no fear of death. I know heaven is real. And I know that it's a place of comfort and peace, and it's without any pain or suffering. So as a father, this was a horrible experience, and for our family it was a horrible experience. And even for Sabrina, it was a horrible experience. But yet, God used it as a life-changing experience for Sabrina and for the family. And so it was a horrible experience. But yet, it was a beautiful experience, a priceless experience. Thank you for allowing me to share this story. It's been on my heart now for a couple of weeks, and I asked Joyce to let me share this with you, and thank you for letting me do this.